All right, good morning and welcome to another edition of Saturday Conversations, a podcast where we can go a little bit deeper with some familiar faces within the Pittsburgh sports scene. My guest this week, he's always been one of my favorite people in this business, someone I grew up reading and hearing on the radio. Now someone he's a coworker, and I still enjoy reading him very much, Gene Collier. He's tremendous. Gene, thank you so much for doing this. How are you?
I'm good, Jason. Thanks for having me, and thanks for your kind words. I appreciate it.
Of course, absolutely. Gene's been at the PG since 1992. Am I correct, Gene?
Yeah, technically.
And then the press before that.
Yeah, I came to work there in '82, and then I left to go to the press, and then the press went away, and then I came back. They were nice enough to have me back.
Awesome. And Gene is from the eastern part of the state and has made Pittsburgh home. So I wanted to have Gene on for a lot of different reasons. The biggest involves his writing style, very unique, love of language, just creative. Nobody writes like you, Gene. If I would try, I'd fall flat on my face. I love it. It's something I grew up reading. We'll get into more of this, but how did that start? How did you first start finding your voice, unique voice, all of that stuff?
Yeah, well, thanks for your question, Jason, and thanks for your interest in this. You have similar stories, I'm sure, of how you got interested in writing and stuff. Mine was basically just completely built from panic, if you will. I mean, I got out of college thinking I was going to be anchoring the CBS Evening News, and of course that didn't happen. So I started applying for jobs in newspapers, and I finally got one, just kind of out of the blue. And my mission at that point was just to write like the people who had jobs, just so that I could continue to have one. But I was fortunate enough to be in a place, it was actually the Pottstown Mercury, where the people who were my supervisors encouraged me to write like myself, whatever that was, and not to try and write like other people. So that kind of pushed me offshore, if you will. And then I started to, think more along those kinds of terms. And, after I'd been in the business a couple of years, I was really struck by how the things I was covering, which was mostly baseball. I covered the Phillies in Philadelphia, and I was really struck by how much other media was dominating the coverage. The radio and TV were everywhere in the locker room and all of the stadium. And it just occurred to me that the things I would say in a game story, for example, are things that anybody who cares about this is going to already know. So I better say it in a different way. I better have something else, another way to explain it, or another way to describe it, or something else. And that kind of always drove me to write something that is not like everything else, or even other things that is written about whatever I'm covering. I just wanted it to look different and feel different. And I went to, ridiculous and sometimes comical lengths to make that happen. But that's always kind of the way I approached it.
Very cool. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Gene's writing style. Gene writes about politics 100% of the time now. Talk about maybe some differences between that and covering sports. Also, Gene's sense of humor. And we're going to kick around a few present day topics in this podcast as well. Before we get into more, though, I want to let you know this podcast is brought to you by Edgar Snyder and Associates. Law firms come and go, but what law firm has been here in Western PA fighting for injury victims for more than 40 years? Edgar Snyder and Associates. What firm has a staff of over 130 people who live and work here? Edgar Snyder and Associates. Law firms come and go, but Edgar Snyder and Associates is a name you can always trust. So remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. If you've been hurt in an accident, call them at 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit edgarsnyder.com. They're available 24/7. All right, Gene. So you said coming out of college, you sort of wanted to be on TV. I was reading an old interview with you and said, I wanted to be Walter Cronkite, but it was too much stuff to carry around. It was easier to carry a notepad. So you really wanted to be a on-air TV radio type of person?
I mean, going back even further than that, Jason, I mean, I really had no idea what I wanted to be. It was my father who said to me, first of all, he informed me that I was going to college, which that had never occurred to me.
He told you were going to college.
Yeah, he told me. And I said, what? for what? He said, well, your grades are not not great, but the better ones that you have are in like English and history and stuff like that. So you should probably be in journalism. I said, oh, good. What is it? He said, well, it's the people who, bring you the news and that kind of thing, like Walter Cronkite. He said, so that's all I needed to know. I was going to college, and that's what I was going to study, and I studied it really hard and desperately as a very marginal student. I was really petrified all the time I was there. So I worked pretty hard at it, and I kind of thought, well, that's what I'll be. But the more I got into it, and I really wasn't being facetious about the carrying stuff around in that era. And as you can see, I am the world's oldest man. In that era of broadcasting, you had every interview you did, you had to set up like you were filming a movie. You'd sound lighting people. There were no mini cams. There were no phones, obviously, cell phones. So yeah, it was a tremendous amount of trouble just to get a school board member to say no comment. I mean, we're making a movie, and it just seemed so much better to me that the people that I was trying to interview were much more honest and forthcoming and candid if I didn't have all that stuff with me. So when I finally got to the point where I was applying for jobs, I applied mostly to newspapers. It just seemed so much simpler to me, and deeper too. It seemed like the more important journalism was being done in newspapers at that time.
I have a similar story, Gene. When I was coming out of college, I interned at a TV station in DC, and I wanted to be Greg Brown or Bob Pompiani and be on air. And so I interned at Redskins Park, and this was 2005 into 2006. The Redskins were getting good. It was when Clinton Portis was dressing up as a goofball and Mark Brunell was the quarterback. Anyway, so I'm going out there, and then I see the whole like media drill. It was my first look kind of inside the ropes. And I'm seeing like Jason Lockenfor as a beat writer at the Washington Post. Howard Bryant was there as well. Mike Wise was a columnist, Thomas Boswell, etc. And I'm seeing the newspaper people drive the stories. And I'm thinking like, no, I want to be like that. I want to be the person who like everybody else is sort of chasing, following, admiring. And that changed my lens on it. It wasn't necessarily carrying around stuff, but I'm like, maybe I could do this writing thing. This is really appealing. And I had very little training or interest. And then I started applying to newspaper jobs too, and got hired by a wee little one in Northern Virginia. And here we are. And here we a bunch of job changes since.
It's funny. This is probably, well, no, this is definitely wildly unrelated. But you happen to mention Thomas Boswell. I had a dream about him last week.
Really?
That I was meeting Thomas Boswell for lunch. I don't know him. I've only I have great regard for him. But I had a dream. I was meeting Thomas Boswell for lunch, and he was not showing up. So finally, I just said to whoever was at the restaurant, well, I'll sit down. So I sat down, and instead of Thomas Boswell coming over to my table, the Rolling Stones came over to my table.
Gene, what did you eat before bed?
And Ron Wood was there, yeah. And then some guy I didn't know, I figured was the ghost of Charlie Watts. So again, I apologize for all that, but that's the way my mind works, Jason. I'm sorry.
I love it. I love it. And it translates onto the page and it creates a wonderful product. But it's funny you mentioned Boz too. He was a big influence in me wanting to do the columnist thing. I saw the way he carried himself, and it probably makes me a bit of a nut job because like I always saw Boz around at different events, and like I think I got to go there, I got to do this, blah blah blah. But Boz is great. I grew up reading you, but I also grew up reading him in the DC area. Barry Sferluga covered the Nats, was like my first exposure to beat coverage and outside of Pittsburgh. And how
those were great guys to read.
Yeah. All right. So that's kind of a good transition to something else I wanted to ask you about, Gene. You've always been a big proponent of reading a lot. And I know that sounds like a basic thing to people outside of the business, but I think about what we do like this, like, good in, good out. You're not going to be able to write well or tell a story if you're not reading that first. Like I find myself more creative and doing my job better if I'm reading things and being inspired that way. And I think that's something you have long ago figured out, correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've always drawn the analogy of music. To me, it strikes me as just impossible to be a musician, much less a good musician or a creative musician, without listening to music all the time and all kinds of different music to see how music works. And that, to me, is exactly analogous to the language. You can't, even purport to, present the language unless you're constantly reading. And by that, I mean watching how the language works and how different writers use it and those kinds of things. You kind of have to be aware of all the potential of the language before you can present it in a way that makes yours different. You have to see what everyone else is doing and understand what everybody else is doing, so that you can better do it for yourself. I don't know much another way to explain it. A jazz musician once said, "Here's what to do: learn every song you know in every key that there is, and then go out and play and forget all that stuff." But it's in there. It informs everything you do, and you can't write without reading constantly.
Yeah,
in my view,
no doubt. All right, so let's wrap up this first segment here. We're going to go to a break with a message from the Bradenton Area Convention and Visitors Bureau. When we get back, I'm going to talk a little bit of politics. I want to ask you about the Trite Trophy and a few more things business-wise before we get into some current day topics. So stay with us.
Embrace the laid-back charm of island life while sinking your toes in the sand and discovering real, authentic Florida in the Bradenton area. Unspoiled beauty and pristine beaches, a vibrant waterfront downtown energized by local arts and culture, fresh Floridian cuisine with a flourish of rich history, and friendly locals ready to welcome you to this preserved paradise on Florida's Gulf Coast. Plan your visit today at BradentonGulfIslands.com.
Welcome back to Saturday Conversations, talking about journalism, writing, the business, columnizing. I don't know what you want to call it with Gene Collier. Gene now writes politics for the Post-Gazette. I would think vastly different than sports. Gene, is it? Like, what do you notice? How do you compare one to the other?
Yeah, I have some experience with this, Jason, because I'd left sports at another time. Actually in the late 90s, and I was gone for like 6 years. I wrote features and eventually columns, and they became political eventually. So I had that experience, and I would still, I guess I would still describe it in the same way. When you go from sports to politics, you go from knowing something about something to knowing nothing about nothing. I mean, I've been doing it long enough now that it's not as severe as it sounds, but there's a tremendous amount of mental dirt to move to be able, or at least for me, to be able to present, a political opinion or really any kind of opinion on a public issue, because I just don't have that much experience with it. So when I write a sports column, especially after having done it for a long time, there's, I guess, the equivalent of muscle memory in there. I start a column, and now I know what goes next, and now I know what goes after that. And the stuff I'm doing now, I don't have that. I don't have that muscle memory. I'm kind of plodding along. I still have the same writing methods and techniques and such, but it's harder.
Yeah. I've noticed that with the baseball writing. Well, it was first hockey to baseball.
Yeah.
And then the moving dirt is a great analogy. And then baseball to column work. If I wrote a baseball column, that felt easy. I could do that. And then if I had to write a football column or a hockey column, or basketball column, I'd get tripped up and would, I'm on a much different level, but you'd feel like you're kind of moving dirt. So that's.
Well, how have you found the column writing process? Is it more or less daunting than you thought? And I mean, what are the issues there?
It's different. I don't want to say it's daunting, or if I say it's, not hard, it makes me sound cocky, because it is hard. It's a different kind of hard.
Mm-hmm.
I find it hard to, this is going to be weird for a columnist to say, I find it hard to feel like it's my place all the time to tell people what to think. They're just like shouting my opinions from the mountaintop. Like, this is what you should think. This is what, like, who made me that person?
Right.
But I also think that's kind of what is good about this. Like, sometimes that's the right lane to go down. Other times, maybe a feature lane or something. Just be honest with readers and say, look, I don't have an opinion. I don't know how I feel, but here's something I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
So I like that. It trips me up with the column writing and feeling like I have to or I can do everything. And that's you and I talked right when I started doing this. And I'm not good at curtailing that. I've maybe gotten a little bit better. I don't think I'm not good at it. I'm just less terrible.
You have so much to do and you feel like you're covering every team. I get that. But, I don't think you should necessarily feel like you have to have a strong opinion all the time. I mean, you have this opinion license, so to speak. But, if you have a fishing license, you don't have to go fishing every day. The column can be, it's your column. That's the real raw truth of it. It's yours, and you can do anything you want with it. It's a completely open canvas. It can be a feature. It can be, funny. It can be grim. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be a visceral opinion. 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah, no, it's a great way of putting it, and I should center back to that too. I think we all get caught up in too much of the like slapping opinions on everything. It's just kind of our society, right? Social media and always feeling like you have to feel a certain way or have an answer. It's black and white. That's not.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of pressure, I think, now too, for the opinions that you write to be, as you say, black or white. I mean, you can have an opinion that is 50 shades of gray, if you will.
Yeah.
But people tend not to like it or not to read all the way through it. I mean, if they dive into it and they find that they're agreeing with this, sometimes they'll read it, and if they disagree, sometimes they'll read it. But if they don't know, or you're making them think about things they haven't thought about, a lot of times that's off-putting, and it's even off-putting to editors. A lot of editors don't want to see you with your 50 shades of gray, if you will. I know I'm using that term incorrectly, but
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's not coming out hammering one thing, over the head. Like, you're seeing nuance in the world, which I think you and I agree probably need a little bit more of that, but my goodness. All right. Well, let me move on. I don't want to keep you too long, Gene, but I did want to get this in there. Your Trite Trophy column is, for my entire life, been one of my favorite things to read. I know growing up, my dad loved reading you. That was my first, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make you feel like the world's oldest man. No. But it was just something that, I can't talk about this without talking about the Trite Trophy. And like, my dad and I would be sending it to each other, be like, did you see what Gene wrote? It's hilarious. So anyway, I love the piece. Where did the idea from the piece came from? Where did it come from? Excuse me. And what's your sort of process throughout the year for putting that together? I don't feel like that's something you can just sit down and, in a couple of hours bang out.
Yeah, well, again, as to the genesis of it, just outright panic. I mean, when I first started writing the column in '84, I started in December of '84 at the Pittsburgh Press, and I had written, I think, exactly one column when I was out of ideas. When you first get a column, you'll think, well, this is great because I have a lot of opinions and this should be easy.
Yeah.
But
then you run out of them.
Then you run out of them. It might be 2 years in, it might be 2 weeks in, or in my case, 1 day in. So I went in, I'd had this column in the back of my mind. If I ever was a columnist, I would comment on this. But I remember I went into the press, it was a Sunday afternoon, I had to write for Monday. And I thought, well, I'll try that. And the first one, just like the Super Bowl, was not called the Trite Trophy. It was just a column where I rounded up all these cliches that annoyed me and passed it off as an actual column. And then I stumbled upon it the next year when I was, again, desperate for an idea, and I was looking back to see what I'd done last year. So I did it again, and then it kind of got rolling. And the more years it went on, actually the easier it got to do because I'd get a lot of help with it. If people saw something that annoyed them, they would send it to me. Or there's a certain section within the Trite Trophy that's called the mixologist medal, which is when an athlete starts one cliche and ends with the next. That's when Heinz Ward famously said they'll have their hands cut out for them. He had so many cliches in his head, he gave you two as one. So I've done that for a lot of years too, and people find those and they send them to me. So it's gotten easier, and again, it's a topic that I don't have to think of. So I've been doing it. Now I don't know when it got to be so large. I mean, it's an exhaustive column to read. It's 50, 60 inches. But you, on your podcast here on this Saturday, what is it, March 22nd?
Yep.
Have outed yourself as one of the 11 or 12 people who look forward to this column. Really, there are only a handful of them.
Well, Gene, I know you're full of it at that point, because I look at our web numbers, probably more than I should, and I see when you post that thing what it does. So don't try to sell me that.
Well, I get a lot of comments on it, yeah, but I don't know if I can do another one without now that I'm not in the department. But we'll see. I appreciate your kind words on it, and there are some people who look forward. I got an email. This is unbelievable, Jason, but this actually happened. I got an email from a guy in Texas who said that, I think it was the Super Bowl. They have a certain type of Super Bowl party, and it's built around the Trite Trophy. It's like a bunch of guys who go into the dinner or family room or whatever it is, and when the game starts, you can only speak in cliches.
Oh my God!
And if you say something that's not a cliche, you're out of the party. You have to come back next year.
Wow. Yeah. With the way we talk today, Gene, that party would last about 15 minutes.
You would think.
And then it would just be an empty room.
Stay in there a long time. Yeah.
Unbelievable. All right.
You'd be hammered at the end of
that. Yeah, for sure. All right. So let's go to some modern topics here. I do have a quick read from the UFC gym I want to get to, but after that, we'll talk a little Steelers, a little Pirates, and see where we go from there. Pittsburgh, are you ready to train like a champion? UFC gym has everything for total body health under one roof. They have group classes from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to Zumba, personal training, cardio, weights, cryotherapy, infrared saunas, and more for an unbeatable price. Not sure where to begin? All members get a starter session with an expert coach to help map out your fitness plan. Your first visit's on us. Drop in with free parking at Market Square or the waterfront, and follow UFC Gym Pittsburgh on social media. Train different, feel unstoppable at UFC Gym. All right, some modern stuff, Gene. This quarterback situation feels perfect for humor, sarcasm. I don't know what the heck they're doing. In a somewhat serious manner, do you think there's any world where the Steelers, where this pays off for the Steelers waiting for Aaron Rodgers? Or do you just look at this and say, what in the world are they doing?
Well, yeah, I'm not following as closely as I did, Jason, but did they not bring Mason Rudolph back because they thought they might not be able to sign Aaron Rodgers, or what was he brought back to be a backup because they thought they could?
It seems like either or. I don't know if I have a clear indication of why they brought Mason Rudolph back. I mean,
yeah, well, I have a higher opinion of him than a lot of people. I think he throws a good deep ball. And when he was playing with, when he was on the team with Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett, I thought of those three, when he throws the ball deep, I'm more confident that it's going to come down in a black and gold jersey.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really a crazy thing. I mean, they certainly look weak from the whole thing. One of my favorite humans and comics is Bill Crawford. Maybe you know him. He's over at DBE.
Yep.
He said, I was driving somewhere Monday morning listening to him, and they were talking about the Aaron Rodgers situation, and he said, and I want to make sure everyone knows this is Bill, and I want to give him credit for it. He said, no, I just don't like this. It feels like we're running a mom and pop pizza shop and we're waiting on Chef Boyard douchebag. I just thought that was, that's right. That's the way I feel.
Can't disagree. I loved Bill Crawford too. I saw his stand-up once.
If you get the chance to see him, he's great on stage.
It was excellent. It was excellent. So, all right, another question about a star. This one is a guy under contract. I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Gene. I was talking with Ed Bouchette about TJ Watt, and he said he would have no problem trading TJ. I share that opinion. What about you? Do you think that's something they should entertain?
Well, yeah, it all depends on the other side of the question for what, Watt for what. But I'd be open to it, depending. But that's always the thing with the trades. I mean, he is a phenomenal. He's the best player on the team and has been for years. So you better get something you really covet, or is really just patently really valuable for a guy who's he's still in the top 10 players in the league, I'd imagine.
Yeah, would agree with that. All right, let's do a couple baseball questions, Gene. One of the things that we do that drives me crazy is we have grades. We have trade grades. Immediately after a trade, have to grade the trade. I don't understand it, but if you had to grade the Pirates offseason, what would it be? And can you give me any I knew it was coming.
No, I've read all of your spring training stuff. You did a great job down there, and I
thank you.
Defer to your opinion because it's so much more current and present than mine. But I thought it was just terrible, and it was unlucky too with the first baseman Horwitz injured, and now have you heard anything on Jared Jones today?
No, I haven't heard anything, but I don't think it's good. I mean, you want pitcher, elbow, second opinion. Those conversations don't end well most of the time.
Just witness Garrett Cole. I mean, at least Jared Jones is 10 years younger or more, I guess. But I thought it was dreadful. I mean, the Pirates off season is always. The highlight of it is that they're back in the program where they support local business. That's usually the highlight of the local thing. The Pirates. You know what local small business they should support? The Pirates. The Pirates. How about supporting the Pirates? How about acquiring some players that might help you win more than 70 or 75 games? Have you made a prediction yet, Jason?
I did. And we're on opposite ends of the spectrum, Gene. I'm going to say 84 wins.
84.
Yep. Okay.
Well,
I am perfectly sober right now. I swear to you.
Well, when you're right down their lineup, parts of it does look like a major league lineup. If you have Cruz and Reynolds and Bart has the kind of year he had last year, and you have a decent top of the rotation, I mean, you can fool some people with that. You can do what you did last year, or as you suggest, 8 games more. But that's one of those things. I mean, I'll just believe it when I see it. I think
I don't blame you.
70 to 75 again, something like that. Yeah, but it's very. There aren't many teams that go to spring training, even in the inequitable financial system in place. There aren't many teams that go to spring training with absolutely no chance. I mean, even in the NFL, especially in the NFL, everyone starts training camp thinking, well, if this and this and this, the Pirates don't have that. As I know today.
World Series, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I could make an argument. Their hitting situation was pretty ugly last year. I mean, obviously the production was ugly, but I mean, as far as,
So
guys,
you think that'll just change by market correction or something?
I think it will be better. I don't think it will be as bad. I think they can be 18th, 19th, 20th in runs, somewhere in there. Yeah. If you get a productive Jack Sawinski, if you get Brian Hayes to stay healthy, they need a couple. Noah Hiles called them coin flips. If you get a couple of these coin flips to work out, not all of them, it's just you go down there. There's a lot of negativity around what was happening. A lot of things that were done incorrectly as far as coaching guys, making changes when changes shouldn't be made. Seeing pitches when they're not comfortable seeing pitches, prohibiting guys from swinging early. I just don't think they came anywhere near close enough to getting what they should out of their hitters.
Yeah, and maybe
I could be wrong.
No, you're right. Maybe they'll get it this year. Maybe those coin flips will come up in their favor. But if they do, and they win 80 or 84 games, it'll be no thanks to them.
Not wrong. All right, Gene, thanks so much, man. This has been so much fun. I appreciate it. We could go twice as long. I love talking about the business with you. It's
great. Thanks so very much for having me, Jason.
You got to make sure you like and subscribe. Everybody out there, you can get all of this. Every week we do a different Saturday conversation, aptly titled. We'll be back next week. And for Gene Collier, I'm Jason Mackey. Don't go anywhere.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.